So as the tail ender batsman of this conference, I'll be talking to you about venous thromboembolism prophylaxis in hip and knee arthroplasty. So TKR and THR are successful procedures, but they are at a high risk for venous thromboembolism, which has high morbidity and mortality. Of course, improved surgical and anesthetic techniques coupled with early mobilization has led to a substantial reduction in the rate of venous thromboembolism. However, VTE prophylaxis is an intricate balance between safety and efficacy. You want to prevent symptomatic VTE and pulmonary embolism, but at the same time, you want to avoid excessive anticoagulation as this can lead to hematoma formation and infection. So there are a plethora of options here. So if I can just have a show of hands, how many of you are using low molecular weight heparin or oral 10A inhibitors? And how many of you are using aspirin? Okay. So the problem is that the optimal agent for VTE prophylaxis has not been identified. And why is there confusion over the drug of choice? So if you see this summary of recommendations from the American College of Chest Physicians, all the drugs have a grade of 1B, but no drug has received the gold standard recommendation of 1A. So in this talk, I'll be trying to convince you why aspirin is the drug of choice with a strong body of literature. So we'll cover aspirin in terms of efficacy, safety, allergy concerns, traumatic conditions, and in high-risk patients. So why aspirin? It is an oral agent that does not require monitoring. It is well tolerated, effective, easily available at a low cost. It does not require dose adjustment in renal patients, and it has a lower risk of bleeding and wound-related complications. So let's look at this systematic review. 13 randomized controlled trials, which is level 1 evidence, and 6,000 participants after THR and TKR. And they found that aspirin had a VTE risk which was not statistically significantly different from low molecular weight heparin or rivaroxaban. Another systematic review with 13 randomized controlled trials and 20,000 patients, they concluded that aspirin prophylaxis was found to be associated with similar efficacy and safety outcomes when compared to all other anticoagulants. So is aspirin effective in trauma? Now what you need to know is that trauma by itself is a procoagulant state, and the typical patient is a frail elderly patient with multiple comorbidities. And arthroplasty in traumatic condition has much higher rates of venous thromboembolism, which is the 4th most common complication. So this study published in JBJS compared aspirin with all other drugs in patients who had a femoral neck fracture and were undergoing either a partial hip or a total hip replacement. And they found that the overall VTE rate was 1.9% in patients who received aspirin compared to 6.7% for those who received any of the other anticoagulants. What about patients who are allergic to aspirin? Now you may have a patient who tells you that, doctor, I'm allergic to aspirin or NSAIDs, and our inherent response would be, okay, we'll give you another drug. But let's understand how allergies impact our care. Allergy is usually a misnomer which is falsely documented or reported by the patient without any verification. To give you a context of antibiotic allergies, 32 million patients in the US are labeled with a penicillin allergy, but only less than 5% of these patients represent a true clinically important hypersensitivity reaction. And why is this important? So let's look at this paper, which won the 2019 John Chanley Award. They compared patients after THR and TKR who received cefuroxime or cefazolin and another group who did not receive these antibiotics because of allergy and were given another antibiotic. And they found that the PJI rates were significantly higher where non-cefazolin or cefuroxime antibiotics were used after THR and TKR. So how does aspirin compare in this regard? Again, another study published in JBJS where they analyzed 45,000 patients, of whom around 800 did not receive aspirin because of a self-reported allergy. And they concluded that patients with a self-reported allergy to aspirin or NSAIDs were at a significantly higher risk if they received any non-aspirin thromboprophylactic agent. And how significant was this risk? It was 8 times higher in patients who did not receive aspirin because of a history of allergy to aspirin or NSAIDs. Does aspirin impact periprosthetic joint infections? So we all know that PJI is the most devastating and dreaded complication with high morbidity and mortality. So how does PJI and DVT prophylaxis go hand in hand? If you give aggressive anticoagulation, it's going to cause increase in the wound drainage and hematoma formation, which increases your risk for PJI. Also, if you have increased wound drainage in the early post-operative period, it's going to lead to a longer hospital stay and again increase your risk for infection. So we know that aspirin has a dose-dependent action. In low doses, it has an antiplatelet effect, but in higher doses, it has anti-inflammatory and analgesic effects. However, what is lesser known is that the active component in aspirin, that is salicylic acid, has direct antimicrobial effects on Staph aureus, and it prevents bacterial adhesion to platelets as well. So how did aspirin do in this regard? This study compared aspirin with warfarin, where about 1,400 patients received aspirin and 1,700 patients received warfarin after THR and TKR. And they found that the incidence of PJI was significantly lower at 0.4% in patients who received aspirin, whereas it was 1.5% in those who received warfarin. Lastly, is there a role for aspirin in high-risk patients? There are concerns over aspirin that it may not provide adequate prophylaxis in all these high-risk patient groups. And of all these risk factors, a prior history of venous thromboembolism is the most significant predictor for VTE, again after arthroplasty. So how did aspirin do in this regard? This study analyzed 36,000 patients, of which 1,087 reported a prior history of venous thromboembolism before undergoing a hip or knee arthroplasty. And they found that aspirin is still effective and safe even in patients with a history of VTE, which is the strongest risk factor in patients undergoing THR and TKR. So what is our institutional protocol? For standard risk patients, on day 0, we give them enoxaparin, that is low molecular weight heparin. But from day 1, we start aspirin 75 milligrams once a day for 4 weeks. In high-risk patients, we do consider rivaroxaban or apixaban for 4 to 6 weeks. However, even aspirin has been proven to be highly safe and efficacious even in these high-risk patients. So right now, if you're sitting in the audience and you're not using aspirin, you might think I'm in the minority and you're happy with your own protocol. So let's see the current practice trends amongst members of the American Association of Hip and Knee Surgeons. 93 to 94% of them are using aspirin after THR and TKR, and only 2 to 3 or 4% are using low molecular weight heparin or oral 10A inhibitors after their arthroplasty procedures. What about the recent trends in DVT prophylaxis? You can see that the trajectory of only one drug, that is aspirin, is constantly on the rise, but all the other 3 options, rivaroxaban, enoxaparin, and warfarin, are on a steady decline. Thus, to conclude, aspirin has been established as the drug of choice after hip and knee arthroplasty. It is the most cost-effective and safe alternative to traditional anticoagulants. Again, it is important to individualize your strategy for high-risk patients, and you need to remember that venous thromboembolism may still occur even with the use of the most potent anticoagulants. Thank you to Team PAC for this opportunity.